It's time to pick a side. The border war is on the air with BG and TanMan.
Hello everybody, welcome into the border war. This is a quick takes edition. I am the TanMan. BG is at home, resting comfortably as I'm recording this. Probably getting his popcorn ready to watch the Gamecocks and the Crimson Tide later this afternoon. Godspeed to him. You know my thoughts on that matchup later on this afternoon. But today, I am going to be discussing some basketball. The ACC released their conference schedule for the 2019-2020 season finally the other day. Despite what you may have thought about the rollout, it is out there, and we are going to talk about some Tar Heel basketball. I have to do it by myself because I can't quite talk BG into discussing any round ball just yet. That'll be around the corner, but for today, I can do whatever I want. It's just me, so let's get into it. The Tar Heels, the early part of the season came out earlier this summer. We knew the non-conference schedule. We knew that they opened up with Notre Dame. We knew the who and the where. We just didn't know the when for the rest of the way. Now we do, so let's get into it. They open up like a lot of everybody in the ACC, except for Duke, I believe, opens up with a conference game this year. The Tar Heels draw Notre Dame to open things up. I'm not a huge proponent of doing the whole conference games to start the year. Football has done it. I think it does football a huge disservice because we all know how one loss can really affect the trajectory of your season in football. In basketball, not so much. And so I guess I could be swayed that way a little bit. It's nice to see an early test. You want to get fired up and excited about the basketball season, but you don't want to go out and beat anybody by 30 or 40 points. So Notre Dame is opening things up in Chapel Hill. The ACC, they've got their network. They've got this new shiny toy. And look, they want to show it off. So good for them. Again, some games that we already knew. They will be heading to UNC Wilmington to take on former assistant C.B. McGrath. A nice move by Roy. I always like when he does this. He's taking his teams to UNC Asheville when they opened up their new place in the past. We've gone to College of Charleston. Last year we actually opened the season back-to-back at Wofford and at Elon. So North Carolina, Roy Williams, one of the few programs that that says we'll play anybody anywhere and actually puts his money where his mouth is in that. I love seeing these matchups. Again, I have Gardner-Webb and Elon both at home, and then comes the first real, not that Notre Dame's not a real test, but the first big-time non-conference test. They'll be going down to Atlantis. They open up the battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas Thanksgiving week against Alabama. After Alabama, they'll have either Iowa State and Michigan. And outside of that, and potentially in the third day, I think you're talking perhaps Oregon, who they matched up with in the Final Four in 2017, maybe Seton Hall, perhaps a second matchup with Gonzaga we'll talk about in just a minute. But the Battle for Atlantis has really become one of the premier non-conference tournaments. It's kind of filled that vacuum, that the Great Alaska Shootout used to have. It used to be Maui, the Maui Invitational, and the Great Alaska Shootout were the two big-time main, holiday weekend kind of tournaments, but of course that's since folded, and Atlantis has stepped up and filled the void, and that tournament has gone from having a championship of I think it was Central Florida and Harvard the first year to really, like I said, really becoming one of the premier stops during this Thanksgiving weekend. This year's no different. That field is absolutely loaded, guys. That field is absolutely loaded. After that, they'll come home. They'll take on Ohio State in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Ohio State, they started off last year. I think they climbed as high as number 11 in one of the polls. They won their first 2 conference games in the Big Ten early on in some December games, but they lost their first 5 Big Ten games once the new year started, and they really never got back on track. Never got above 500, I don't believe, in the Big Ten. They lost in the second round in the NCAA tournament to Houston last year. That was a young team last year. This is Chris Holtman's 3rd season up in Columbus. And so I expect Ohio State with a 9:30 tip, I believe. I expect that to be a serious dogfight for North Carolina. And after that, here's another one. Now, we knew that we were going to have another conference game before Christmas. We didn't know who, and we didn't know exactly when. Here it is, guys. They were going to play at Virginia on December 7th. So they're going to go, from Thanksgiving week basically all the way until right up before Christmas with a monster of a schedule. You knew you were going to play Virginia twice, but this one, I think this is the best possible outcome schedule-wise for the Tar Heels. Look, Virginia is going to be Virginia, okay? They're going to be tough defensively. They're going to be very well coached. They're only going to struggle so much. They returned Kihei Clark. They returned Mamadi, whatever the big man's name is, Diakite, I think, that made the big shot in the Elite Eight game. But look, that team has got a lot of replacing to do. And Tony Bennett is going to find the right guys, and he's going to plug the right people in. But they're not going to be able to get around losing Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, and DeAndre Hunter and not miss a beat. You're not going to lose the heart and soul, really, of your team and not lose a beat. So if you've got to play Virginia twice, especially if you've got to go up to Charlottesville, because the Tar Heels have really, really struggled on the road in Charlottesville the last few years. They have had North Carolina's number. I love being able to get at them early before some of the young guys and some of the new pieces find their roles and develop into the team they're going to be at the end of the year. Because when we see them at the end of the year, we'll talk about it here in a few minutes, they're going to look massively different than they look on December 7th. You can believe that. So the Tar Heels did catch a little bit of a break there, in my opinion, getting the Cavaliers early. December 15th, Wofford comes to Chapel Hill. This one is one that I personally am really looking forward to. I think due to some scheduling conflicts with the building, they're going to play this one in Carmichael Arena. So instead of 21,000 plus tickets being available, you're looking at around 10,000. I'm going to do my best to try and grab a couple of those, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope. And then they'll go from that Wofford game on that Sunday afternoon for a major West Coast road trip. The potential second matchup with Gonzaga. Last year, these two teams met in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, 103-90 over the Zags. Listen, both teams are replacing a ton. I mean, we know what North Carolina is replacing. The last few years, both of these programs have had a lot of stability, a lot of familiar names. You knew really what you were getting into, how everything was going to go. You had a great idea. This year, for North Carolina, we know the names: Kobe White, Luke May, Kenny Williams, Cam Johnson. Nasir Little came and stopped over for a little while. So we've got some new pieces. Gonzaga's the same way. Josh Perkins, Rui Hachimura has moved on. Zach Norvell Jr. has moved on. So they also have a lot of guys who are trying to carve out new roles for themselves. So this one, this is going to be a really interesting one. From a fan, I love Spokane. They had a tough time for a long time getting teams to play them at their place. So I love that we've scheduled the home and home and we're going up there. Even a rebuilding Gonzaga team scares the bejesus out of me. From Spokane, they're going to go to Las Vegas, where they will meet UCLA in this year's CBS Sports Classic. These two teams have become pretty familiar with one another. These two schools have become fairly familiar with one another, mostly as a result of this. this little 4-team tournament. But last year, these two teams met out in Vegas also at the Orleans Arena. Carolina won that one 94-78. But I think this is where the season kind of took a turn for North Carolina. They had not yet gotten their butt kicked by Michigan. But the night before, they played really sloppy, turned the ball over a lot. You kind of saw Kobe White for the first time really against the team that could punch back against Texas. And everybody struggled. Of course, he came on late in that game. They lost to Texas the night before. So instead of a matchup that everyone anticipated with Michigan State, they drew UCLA. The Bruins actually led 46-41 at halftime. North Carolina had a great second half, but coming off of that Texas loss, seeing how they would respond, I think this is where we got our first idea of, the first sign of adversity, how they would handle that. They answered the bell this year. Again, UCLA, again in Las Vegas, different building, different event, hopefully the same result. After that, they close out the non-conference slate on December 30th against Yale, and then the ACC play starts. They'll open up the new year January 4th at home against Georgia Tech. They'll have 3 straight home games to open up the meat of the ACC schedule. Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, and Clemson. I think looking at this thing, the first 6 games, if you can beat Notre Dame, if you can beat Virginia, I think you have a chance to really set the tone for this 20-game ACC schedule here, because the first 6 games I think are all very, very winnable. You've got a trip to Pittsburgh in there, you've got Miami in there, and sandwiched in between. If they're going to drop one, in my opinion, in this opening stretch, it's going to be on the 22nd of January at Virginia Tech. But even then, the Hokies, listen, that's a tough place to play. But Buzz Williams has moved on. They replaced him with a guy that we're very familiar with in our neck of the woods. He's a Virginia native, Wofford's Mike Young. He did a fantastic job, and you cannot talk about how good of a job he did at Wofford enough. I mean, unbelievable where he took that program to where, compared to what anyone else thought that they could ever possibly be, are two things that are worlds different apart. He's moved on to Blacksburg, but the Hokies, they lose Kerry Blair. Transferred out. Alexander Walker. He went to the NBA. So if they lose this one, I think it's the environment. That may have a lot more to do with it. I think on paper that should be a Tar Heel win. And like I said, you set the standard for this long ACC schedule. After that, business really picks up. You've got, of course, your trip to NC State in there. You've got a trip to Tallahassee in there. The last 3 weeks of this schedule is something that North Carolina fans have become accustomed to. The ACC has backloaded the last few weeks, the last handful of years, really. It starts February 15th. That second game, you get Virginia. This time it's in Chapel Hill. Again, that Cavaliers team then is going to look a lot different from the one you saw the first week of December. From there, they've got a trip to Notre Dame. They've got a trip to Louisville, a trip to Syracuse, and in between, the trip to Duke, of course. And in between there, you've got NC State again. So those last 3 weeks, again, so difficult. It's imperative that for North Carolina to set the standard and to meet the standard that Carolina basketball has set. They've got to get off to a great start. A couple notes about the schedule in general. The first thing is, like North Carolina, they've gotten 3 Saturday, Monday games where you play Saturday, turn around, play again on Monday. That's really important because they caught the short end of the draw on all 3 of those. The Monday game and on those Saturday, Sunday games, they're all 3 on the road, and 2 of them are going to require getting on a plane to go. The first one, the 25th and the 27th of January, you've got Miami, and then your trip to NC State, of course, is just down the road. But after that, February the 1st, February the You've got Boston College, and then at Florida State. Again, that place has had North Carolina's number on more than one occasion, and even when they haven't had our number, when we've had some really good teams, and I'm talking national championship good teams, trips to Tallahassee have always been an adventure. And the final one of these Saturday, Monday draws, Virginia, of course, we just said in those last 3 weeks of the season, you've got Virginia, and then the trip to Notre Dame. Much like the Cavaliers, the team that you see, the Notre Dame team you see on February 17th, is not going to be the team that you see the first game of the season. A Mike Bray coach team, listen, they've caught a lot of bad breaks the last few years, but Mike Bray is one of the best in the business. And again, by the time you see Notre Dame that second time, I guarantee you on the road at their place, you're going to have your hands full. And finally, the other note about the schedule that I really like personally, the Duke game, the first game against the Blue Devils, has always been a midweek game, Wednesday, sometimes a Thursday, and it was always kind of really early in February. In the last few years, they've gotten to where they have creeped this game up later and later, to the point where we were playing Duke, the two times maybe within the last 5 games of one another. We're seeing them twice, within, 2 weeks of one another, 17 days or so. This year, the first one, they've moved back, but they've moved it to a Saturday. Again, a little different. I love it. I love, having this thing late on a Saturday night. Double thumbs up to the ACC, but more importantly, they've given you some space now in between these two matchups. They will be February the 8th and March the 7th. Look, I like having a little bit of space there because it's such a big rivalry that you get a little bit of taste of it, and then you can kind of step back from it, and then you can get it again. But whenever how they've had it the last few years, it just felt like you were just getting one after another, and then they played in the ACC tournament the last 3 years, so it was just kind of boom, 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 and you never really got to sit back and appreciate it. The other thing is, look, teams mature, teams grow, and last year, if we had had the first game earlier and everything happens the way it happened with Zion Williamson and his shoe and everything, look, maybe he's back by the time we play a second time, and we don't have that, we don't miss that opportunity, that matchup twice. So there is going to be some space for both of these teams, really. I don't have the Duke schedule in front of me, but I assume that their last 3 weeks have probably got some tough matchups in there too. So there's going to be some time for growth and some time to get better for both of these squads before they turn around and see one another again. So again, kudos to the ACC for finally stretching that one back out a little bit. So that's all I've got. That is the Tar Heel schedule. It is available now for you to go and check out yourself. These are just a few of my observations of it. Again, I've been waiting for this thing to come out for a while now. Really excited. Now we know, like I said, we knew the who and the where. Now we know the when. And so with that said, college football is minutes away from kicking off. So if you're listening to this sometime this afternoon, go and enjoy a college football game and get ready for what is sure to be another exciting season, and hopefully a season of great success for the North Carolina Tar Heels. BG and I will be back in a few days with the full effect of the border war, where I'm sure we're going to talk about the Tar Heels loss to Wake Forest, what will probably be Clemson win against Syracuse, and what will probably be a Gamecock loss to Alabama. I'm just saying. See you guys next week.